If Spyro the Dragon was a bubble bath, Silent Hill is standing in a damp basement at 2 AM, holding a torch that keeps flickering, while your brain calmly informs you that something is breathing nearby and you don't technically have proof that it isn't you. This is a bad follow-up. This is the tonal equivalent of being wrapped in a warm blanket, handed a mug of something comforting, told everything is going to be okay, and then having the blanket ripped away so someone can whisper, "By the way, your radio knows things." And the worst part, I chose this. 17 games into the PSX index, a completely sensible life decision where I attempt to play, document and psychologically survive all 1,278 North American PlayStation releases. I have gone from headbutting sheep in pastel valleys to walking into fog so thick it feels like it's actively avoiding being looked at. Index number 18, Silent Hill, the game that didn't just scare people, it reprogrammed them. This isn't boo horror, this isn't jump scares and fake tension, this is the game that made an entire generation afraid of static, fog and radios. Three things that on paper should be harmless. No explosions, no orchestral stings, no heroic music telling you when to feel brave, just absence, which is worse. And here's the thing, I need to admit up front, because honesty matters in this project. I've played Silent Hill before. I'm not coming into this blind. I know what this game is. I know what it does. Resident Evil taught me how to survive horror. Silent Hill taught me how to feel uncomfortable existing in it. And now, decades later, I'm playing it again. Older, slower, significantly more tired. But this time, I'm not just playing. I'm watching myself play. Taking notes, recording the footage, trying to articulate why a low resolution alleyway makes my shoulders tense like I've just been accused of something. And that changes everything, because Silent Hill doesn't want to be observed, it wants to be experienced, quietly, alone, preferably in the dark. Instead, I'm sitting there with a notebook, a capture card, and the creeping suspicion that the game knows I'm dissecting it and finds that rude. Let's get one thing straight immediately. Silent Hill on the PlayStation 1 should not work. Technically, it's held together by fog, static, and pure malicious intent. The draw distance is limited because the hardware physically can't render the town properly, so they hide it in fog. The enemies are so awkward, slow, and sometimes barely animated, so they make them unpredictable instead. The voice acting is stilted, strange, occasionally wooden, so it ends up sounding like people who are emotionally disconnected from reality.
My daughter.
Sorry. The only person I've seen in this town is you.
Where is everybody?
I'd tell you if I knew, believe me.
Which is unfortunately perfect. This is accidental genius turned deliberate nightmare. And playing it after Spyro makes that contrast brutal. Spyro trusted me. Spyro believed in me. Spyro gave me the space to breathe. Silent Hill gives me a radio and says, if it starts screaming, you should already be running. That radio is one of the greatest ideas in horror gaming history. Not because it tells you where the danger is, because it tells you that the danger exists before you even understand why. There's something deeply unsettling about being warned without being informed. It's like your own anxiety is being externalized into a plastic box. And I felt it immediately. Not fear, not yet, just tension. The kind that makes you sit forward without realising. The kind that makes your thumbs grip the controller harder, even though you're just walking. And walking is all Silent Hill asks for you at first. No combat tutorial, no cinematic explosion, no gunfire and SWAT teams running in to secure the area. Just fog, footsteps, a town that feels abandoned in a way that suggests it wasn't always meant to be. And that's where Silent Hill starts winning, because most horror games tell you what to fear. Silent Hill lets you figure it out and quietly judges you for every wrong assumption. There's also something deeply funny about this game, and I don't think people talk about it enough. Not haha funny, why is it like this funny? You're a man named Harry Mason. You crash your car, your daughter vanishes into fog, and your response is not panic, not screaming. It's mild confusion and determination, like a man who's lost his shopping trolley at Tesco and refuses to ask for help. This calm, almost detached reaction makes everything worse, because if Harry isn't panicking, why am I? And this is where Silent Hill becomes different from every other PS1 horror game I've played so far in the index. It doesn't rush you, it doesn't escalate immediately, it lets discomfort ferment, which from retention perspective is genius. You don't watch Silent Hill to see what happens next. You stay because you're waiting for the moment your brain finally snaps and accepts that nothing is going to explain itself properly. Fun trivia that makes this even better: Silent Hill's fog wasn't just atmospheric. It was technical necessity turned into an identity. Without it, the PS1 simply couldn't handle the environment, so instead of fighting the limitation, they embraced it, and in doing so, accidentally created one of the most recognisable horror aesthetics of the time. Most games had the flaws. Silent Hill weaponised them, which is basically the Fiesta statement of the entire index. So here I am, 17 games down, 1,261 to go. I've survived vibrating controllers that hated me, sports games that felt like tax evasion, and a purple dragon that quietly dismantled my childhood loyalty. Now I'm walking into a town that doesn't want me here, and it isn't even polite enough to explain why. This is Index 18. This is Silent Hill, and if Spyro was comfort food, this is the meal that sits in your stomach all night and makes you question every life choice that led you here. Turn the lights down, turn the volume up, let's step into the fog.
Daddy, help me. Where are you?
The first real step into Silent Hill isn't dramatic. There's no title card explosion, no sudden musical sting screaming, "This is the scare bit." You just start walking and the town doesn't react. That's important. Silent Hill doesn't perform for you. It doesn't acknowledge your presence in any obvious way. No doors slam shut. No distant screams echo through the streets to reassure you that something is happening. It just exists. And that's deeply unsettling. The fog isn't rolling in, it's already there, thick enough to erase the end of the street, dense enough that you never see where a road actually leads, only where it stops being visible, which does something very specific to your brain, because humans are wired to scan space, like the horizons. We like exits. Silent Hill removes both. You're not lost in a maze, you're lost in nothing, and the sound design makes sure you notice. Footsteps echo slightly too long. Wind whistles through alleys that don't feel wide enough to justify it. Somewhere, metal creaks, not loudly, not urgently, just enough to remind you that structures age, rot and collapse. It feels abandoned, but not empty. And then the radio crackles. The first time it happens, I didn't react fast enough. Not because I didn't know what it meant, I did. But because my brain hadn't caught up with my body yet. There's a half-second delay between the sound starting and the understanding that something unseen has entered the space. That delay is where Silent Hill lives, because the radio doesn't scream immediately, it splutters. Static bleeds in like a bad thought you didn't invite, and suddenly I'm not walking casually anymore. My thumbs tighten, my shoulders rise, I slow down, not consciously, just instinctively. Because moving too fast feels wrong, like running in a dream. And here's the genius part. You still don't see anything. The radio is panicking, the town is silent, and you're standing in the middle of the street, rotating the camera like that will somehow make the fog feel less smug. Silent Hill teaches you very quickly that information is incomplete by design. The radio tells you something is nearby, not where, not what, not how many, just nearby. Which means your imagination gets involved, and imagination is always crueler than polygons. Technically, this is a PS1 game that's showing its age. The models are simple, the animations are stiff, the textures blur together like wet paint, but psychologically, this is still elite level manipulation, because the fog doesn't just hide enemies, it hides certainty. You can't plan routes. You can't scope areas properly. You don't know if turning left is smart or stupid until you've already committed. And commitment is terrifying in a game where retreat is never clean. There's a moment early on where you walk down an alley. It's narrow. The walls close in. The camera shifts slightly, as if it doesn't want to be there. The radio gets louder, the static is now aggressive. You stop. Not because the game told you to, because your body did. And that's when Silent Hill becomes physical. My breathing changed. I noticed it. Shallow, careful, as if the game could hear me. And that's ridiculous, but also completely true. There's trivia here that makes this moment even more effective. The team deliberately avoided loud jump scares early on. They wanted players to anticipate fear, not react to it, which is why the enemies are often slow, which is why the town feels empty longer than expected, which is why your first instinct isn't panic, it's caution. Silent Hill doesn't want you screaming, it wants you to listen. And the enemies, when they finally appear, they don't announce themselves. No roar, no music cue, just shapes moving incorrectly in the fog, limbs at odd angles, jerky movements that feel more like malfunctions than aggression. And that's worse, because it doesn't feel like something's chasing you. It feels like something existing in the same space that hasn't quite figured out what it's supposed to be yet. Combat, when it happens, is awkward, deliberately so. You swing, you miss, you adjust. There's no power fantasy here. Every hit feels desperate, not heroic. And when an enemy falls, there's no triumph, just relief, which is dangerous, because relief becomes addictive. You don't feel good for winning, you feel good for surviving, and Silent Hill keeps making sure that feeling never lasts too long. Another small but crucial detail, the town map. Most games give you a map and expect gratitude. Silent Hill gives you a map and immediately starts damaging it. Bloodstains, rips, sections you can't read. It's a perfect metaphor. You are never fully informed here. Even your tools decay. And walking through Silent Hill, I realised something important. I wasn't scared yet. I was alert, constantly. My eyes scanning the fog, my ears tuned to static, my mind filling gaps with worst case scenarios. This is sustained tension, not spikes, which is why people remember Silent Hill so vividly. Fear fades, tension lingers. By the time I reached the first proper interior, walls closing in, lighting dimmer, sound more claustrophobic, my body was already tired, not from action, from vigilance. And that's when the game tightens the grip, because Silent Hill doesn't exhaust you with difficulty, it exhausts you with awareness. You're never comfortable, never relaxed, never confident that you understand what's happening. And somehow, even knowing this, even having played it before, it still works. The fog still feels heavy. The radio still feels intrusive. The silence still feels judgmental. And I realised, standing there in a grey street that refuses to end, the game isn't trying to scare me. It's trying to outlast me. And that's a very different kind of horror. Silent Hill does not want you to feel powerful. It doesn't want you to feel capable. It wants you to feel like a man who has been handed a plank of wood and a vague sense of responsibility. Combat in Silent Hill is not about mastery. It's about damage control. Every encounter starts to feel the same internal monologue. Okay, I can probably handle this. Followed immediately by, why did I just say that out loud? Your first weapons are optimistic. A plank, a pipe, things you'd normally associate with DIY, not survival horror. And yeah, here I am, swinging them at something that looks like it was assembled by accident. The controls don't help. Harry Mason does not pivot. He commits. When you turn, he turns like a man steering a fridge down a narrow hallway. There's weight to every movement, not cinematic weight, not administrative weight, like he's filling out a form before every swing. And that means timing matters. You can't spam attacks. You can't panic swing and hope. If you miss, there's a pause, a beat, a moment where the game silently says, are you sure about that? This is where humour leaks in, because the panic is very real. I found myself backing away from enemies while swinging wildly, like a man trying to ward off responsibility with a broom. And the enemies don't rush you. They shuffle, they hesitate, they move just slowly enough that you start doubting your own urgency, which is awful, because now the fear isn't speed, it's proximity. They're close enough to make decisions feel immediate, but far enough to feel that every missed swing feels like a personal failure. And when you finally connect, there's no flourish, no satisfying hit spark, Just a dull sound and the quiet hope that it was enough. Sometimes it isn't. Which brings us to guns. The introduction of firearms in Silent Hill is not empowering. It's bureaucratic. You don't feel armed. You feel accountable. Because ammo is scarce, and the game makes sure you know it. Every bullet feels like a resource you'll regret spending later. I'd open the inventory, which pauses the game mercifully, and just stare at my supplies like they might reorganise themselves if I waited long enough. Health drinks, first aid kits, ammo, all limited, all precious, all destined to be used in a moment of panic you'll later replay in your head like, why did I do that? The inventory itself is a masterpiece of stress. Simple, unflashy, no comfort. You're not encouraged to experiment. You're encouraged to hesitate. And hesitation is exhausting. There were moments where I'd stand in a room, radio silent, knowing something was coming. But not because I saw it, but because Silent Hill always brings something eventually. And instead of moving forward, I'd open the menu. Not to use anything, just to breathe. Which is possibly the most honest interaction I've ever had with a game system. The camera deserves special mention here. It's not bad. It's complicated. It's complicit. Sometimes it helps you. Sometimes it angles itself in a way that suggests it knows more than you and it isn't sharing. Fixed angles appear at the worst possible times. You turn a corner and suddenly you're viewing the world from a position that feels judgmental. Like the game has decided this is the angle from which you should experience your regret. And movements under pressure. Let's just say my thumbs were doing things they don't normally do together. Forward becomes sideways. Sideways becomes panic. There's a specific Silent Hill dance where you try to back away, turn, swing and reposition. And every input feels half a second late. Not because the controls are broken, but because stress rewires your hands. Which is genius. Because Silent Hill doesn't simulate panic through speed, it simulates it through clumsiness. You're not bad at the game, you're scared, and scared people are inefficient. There's also something beautifully awkward about how Harry reacts to danger. He doesn't shout, he doesn't swear, he just kinda absorbs it, gets hit, and grunts. Like a man who's too tired to process trauma properly. And that's funny in a bleak way, because I'm sitting here, heart rate up, shoulders tense, while Harry Mason is silently accepting his fate like this is just how some Tuesdays go now. Enemy variety ramps up slowly, which is worse than dumping it all on you at once. You learn patterns, you think you're safe, and then something moves differently, lies differently, attacks at an angle you weren't prepared for, and suddenly all that cautious confidence evaporates. Which is where Silent Hill really shines. It doesn't punish aggression, it punishes assumptions. You think you know what kind of game this is, until it reminds you that you're still guessing. By the end of a combat-heavy stretch, I was exhilarated. I was drained, physically, mentally. My hands needed a break, my jaw was clenched, and I realised something very important. This game isn't hard in a traditional sense. It's hard to stay composed. Every system, combat, inventory, camera movement is tuned not for challenge, but for vulnerability. You're not here to dominate. You're here to endure. And the humour, it comes from recognising how unprepared you are, how unheroic this all feels, how the bravest thing you've done in the last 10 minutes was not firing a gun, because you might need that bullet later on. That's Silent Hill, not a power fantasy, a survival negotiation. Silent Hill doesn't tell its story, it murmurs it, and it does so with confidence of something that knows you won't understand it all the first time, and doesn't care. You arrive looking for your daughter, that's it. No prophecy, no chosen one nonsense, no ancient evil monologue delivered with enthusiasm. Just a missing child and a town that refuses to answer basic questions, which is already more unsettling than most horror setups. Because it's mundane. This isn't save the world, this is find your kid. And that changes the tone immediately. The stakes aren't epic, they're personal, and Silent Hill exploits that ruthlessly. The first people you meet don't help in a meaningful way. They don't panic properly. They don't explain properly. They don't even seem fully convinced you exist. Everyone speaks in that slightly delayed, oddly flat PS1 voice acting style, but instead of ruining the atmosphere, it enhances it, because everyone sounds like they're speaking from a place slightly removed from reality, like they're recalling a dream they're not sure actually happened. Trivia moment, and this is important. A lot of Silent Hill's voice acting strangeness wasn't corrected or fixed in development because the team realised it fit the tone. That would normally be considered bad delivery became unsettling detachment. Conversations don't flow naturally. There are pauses where there shouldn't be pauses, emphasis where it shouldn't belong, and it makes every interaction feel off. You never feel reassured by another human's presence. If anything, talking to people makes things worse, which is the opposite of how most games work. In most games, NPCs stabilise the world. In Silent Hill, they destabilise it. They give you information that raises more questions than it answers. They appear, disappear, and reappear with no concern for continuity, and you stop asking why. Because asking why in Silent Hill is a trap. The town isn't interested in logic. It operates on emotional cause and effect. Places exist because they feel right. Events happen because they resonate, not because they make sense. And the game never stops to explain that. It just expects you to adjust. There's also a beautiful cruelty in how the story unfolds. You're always slightly behind, always reacting. You don't uncover secrets so much as it arrives after something important has already happened. And that creates this constant sense of loss, not just for your daughter, but for clarity. Every clue feels incomplete. Every revelation feels like a fragment, which mirrors the environment perfectly. The town is broken, the map is damaged, the story is fractured, nothing aligns cleanly, and yet it all feels deliberate. This is where Silent Hill separates itself from the contemporaries. Resident Evil gives you lore through documents and exposition. Silent Hill gives you an implication. You piece together meaning through architecture, enemy design, and tone. Why does this area feel oppressive? Why does this monster move like that? Why does this room exist at all? The game never answers these directly. It lets your subconscious do the work, and that's exhausting, but effective. I found myself thinking about scenes after they had ended, not because they were flashy, but because they lingered. A line of dialogue delivered too calmly, a reaction that didn't match the situation. It's unsettling in a way real conversations sometimes are, and that's the key. Silent Hill horror doesn't come from spectacle. It comes from familiarity warped just enough to feel wrong, which is why, by this point of the game, the humour shifts again. I wasn't making jokes because things were awkward. I was making jokes because I needed distance. Because if you lean too far into the story, if you try to emotionally parse every implication, it starts pressing buttons you didn't agree to hand over. This isn't a story you consume, it's a story you survive. And somewhere around here, I realised something important. Silent Hill isn't asking me to understand it. It's asking me to feel uncomfortable not understanding it, which is a bold move and a risky one. But it's also why this game still gets talked about decades later, because you don't finish Silent Hill with answers. You finish it with questions that follow you out the room. I realised something while playing Silent Hill again. I wasn't remembering the game. I was remembering conversations about the game. Because when I first played this, I wasn't alone with it. I was about 9 or 10 years old, still in primary school, and another kid in my class was playing it at the exact same time, and somehow we stayed in sync. We'd come into school the next morning and quietly confirm progress like it was a military operation. You get past the school, yeah. Piano puzzle, yeah. No excitement, no explanation, just manual understanding that something important had happened. We'd trade information in fragments, not because we were trying to be mysterious, but because neither of us were fully understanding what we were experiencing. We just knew it felt serious. There's something very funny in hindsight about two primary school kids approaching Silent Hill like a part-time job. I wasn't brave, I wasn't skilled, I was prepared. I remember scribbling notes, actual notes, puzzle solutions, weird symbols, half-understood logic. Not because the game told me to, but because it respected the idea that I might. The piano puzzle didn't feel clever, It felt earned. Like the game was saying, I'm not explaining this, but I trust you to work it out. At 9 years old, that felt monumental. No hints, no glowing markers, just two kids trying to decode something that felt older than us. What's strange is, I don't remember being terrified. I remember being absorbed, because fear is different when it's shared. We weren't talking about monsters. We weren't analysing themes. We were talking about vibes. That bit felt weird. That noise came back. I don't like this place. Silent Hill wasn't a horror game. It was a topic. Something that followed us into the playground. Something that stayed unsolved between lessons. And I think that's why it stuck. Once we beat it, properly beat it, the obsession didn't stop. We went to each other's houses trying to unlock different endings. No guides, no internet, just rumours, myths. I heard if you do this. We knew there was something else there. We just didn't know what. And the funniest part, we never found the UFO ending. Not once. It existed somewhere out there. Like a Silent Hill urban legend. Something we assumed was either impossible or a lie invented by someone older. Turns out, we were just missing the rules. Which feels incredibly on brand for Silent Hill, honestly. I hadn't spoke to that friend in nearly 30 years. Different lives, different paths. The sort of distance that doesn't feel dramatic, just inevitable. And then, recently, we reconnected, and within minutes, we were talking about Silent Hill. Same game, same memories, same confusion, same jokes about never finding that stupid UFO ending. That's when it hit me. Silent Hill didn't just scare me as a kid, it connected me, and somehow, without either of us realising, it stayed with both of us. Playing it now at 36, alone, tired and very aware of time, the fear is different. Back then, Silent Hill was something we explored together. Now, it's something I sit with. The ambiguity feels heavier. The silence feels intentional. The town doesn't feel hostile, it feels patient. And maybe that's the difference. As a kid, I was trying to solve it. As an adult, I'm realising it was never meant to be solved, just experienced. Silent Hill didn't change, I did. And somehow, that makes the game feel even more unsettling now than it ever did when I was 9 years old, scribbling notes, trying to understand a piano. Because now I understand enough to know. I never really did. And then it's over. Silent Hill fades out. The fog lifts. The dread dissipates. No relief, no aftercare, no gentle decompression, just a spreadsheet. Because this isn't a Silent Hill retrospective, it's the PSX index. And the index doesn't reward emotional growth, it rewards completion. The very next entries on the list are FIFA. Not one FIFA, not two, 11. Silent Hill asked me to sit with discomfort. FIFA is asking me to tolerate it. Different challenge, same project. The PSX index continues. Next episode, the entire FIFA collection on the PlayStation 1. All of it in one go. And then we keep moving. I'll see you on the pitch.